Wow. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story today. This year, just because it's cheap applause, I'll confess, welcome my firstborn daughter. So, it's a cheap applause. It's awesome. Zella, thank you. You're paying off already. In light of that, I'm really used to reading storybooks, so pardon if I read a little bit of a story today that I'm going to present to you. A little bit of a different story, and I want to get right into it because it's a story about the end of storytelling. And I know most stories are supposed to begin like this, but this is a different kind of story. So I want to tell you a story. I come from a storytelling family. How many of you come from storytelling families? A lot of storytellers in your families? Great. In my family, for instance, there's one story about a kid who was down in his grandmother's apartment building in Atlantic City. He'd just come back from Bradley's, the department store, and he had this He-Man figure in his hand. It was half bee, half man, and he goes into the elevator, and there's this elderly gentleman standing there, and this gentleman says to the boy, "Oh, excuse me, what's your little friend's name?" And the boy says, "Buzz Off." And that being the name of the figure, and so the kid wasn't in on the joke, and yeah, that little boy was me. My parents were hysterical and mortified at the same time. Usually it's my father who was hysterical, my mother was mortified, but and this old man, he was just so taken aback. And so, yeah, I mean, stories like this, they tell you something about the storyteller, far more than they tell you anything about the people involved. Now, I mean, that one was a kind of cute story, but some stories that get told aren't quite as pleasant. They label and pigeonhole people. These are stories that put people in a box that the protagonists can never get out of. It's like the storytellers, they never relinquish control, and so it's some ventriloquist act with real people. I mean, my wife and I know a couple of people like this, and frankly, they're insufferable. So with that couple, when they tell stories, those people don't really tell you anything about the people involved, and the more those stories are repeated, the less you know. Those stories are used as crutches, as symbols, as ways to speak in sign language. The person tells the story, it has some beginning, middle, and an end, then you go and you grab some chips and you turn on the TV and let someone else tell the story for a change. Now, for my whole life, I didn't appreciate the dark side of storytelling. After all, now we're in an industry that embraces it. For years, the theme of advertising and marketing conferences has been all about stories. It's been the dominating theme of South by Southwest, for instance, which is supposed to be one of the more pioneering conferences. We're obsessed with stories, and we feel like this is what marketers should do best, and it's everything that they should do. Tell a great story, one that people will relate to in some way, and then share, and then that's it. That's our jobs. Yet we have it all wrong. And you know how I realized that we have it all wrong? My wife said a comment to me one day several months back that forever rocked my world. And it wasn't, "David, you're totally right." I mean, this is a real story here. This isn't some kind of science fiction. So here's what happened. One day several months ago, my wife, Kara, she has a name, she was venting about the couple I mentioned before. And she said to me, "All they do is tell stories." And this started to worry me. I mean, my job is all about telling stories. I fancied myself a writer as soon as I could write when I was 5 or 6 years old. And I'm invited to speak here, not just because someone heard me speak or something like that, but they probably thought I'm a decent storyteller. And they use that in the most flattering way anyone could. And I can't tell you how many books I've read that reference 1001 Nights. I love books like that because in those books, the storyteller is the hero, and they glorify storytellers and the art of storytelling. So, Kara, please, I'm thinking, not only are you making a totally valid, unquestionably valid remark, but you're ripping apart so much of what I love and so much of what I do. I'm a storyteller at a storytelling company, helping deeper-pocketed storytellers tell their stories, and then I go on the road and I tell stories about all of that while listening to other stories until it's time to go to bed and do the whole thing over again. This is my existence. But no, she said, not realizing everything going through my head, how she was shattering my worldview. And I'll tell you, I can't believe I'm even saying all this out loud. It's like I'm in confession. And okay, I admit I don't know how the whole confession thing works. I think it involves kneeling and dark booths. And so that reminds me, there's an old joke about a Jew who goes into confession. And he says, "Father, I just had sex with the most beautiful 25-year-old woman." And the priest says, "Wait, aren't you Mr. Moskowitz?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Aren't you Jewish?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "So, Mr. Moskowitz, why are you telling me this?" And Mr. Moskowitz goes, "Telling you? I'm telling everybody." And so there I go, stuck in a joke, another story, and I can't help it. I'm still used to the storyteller being the hero. So back to Kara, as it always should be. So Kara goes, those people are so stuck on stories that they don't actually get to know anyone. Holy shit. No, really, holy shit. She's right. I knew it. And not just that instinctual knowing someone's right because they're your partner. It's that one of those things that you know with every atom in you. Capital R right. Holy shit right. And she got it. And she captured everything that's wrong with our industry and what we're trying to do. What Kara got was that when all you have are stories, you have this shorthand that stands in place of relationships. It doesn't build relationships. It's the beginning, middle, end, repeat. On to the next story. You don't get to know someone that way. You just know the stories, and they create this veil where you think you're so close to someone, and yet because you only know the story, all you know is the end of it, often the punchline, and no one bothers digging any deeper than that. So this is what we need to move away from. We need to move away from stories and toward relationships. All too often, it's one or the other. Yes, I can tell the story, like the one about me in the elevator, but really all I'm doing is pigeonholing myself. And do you know anything more about me from that? No, you've got the shorthand. And the real danger is that you think you know more about me than you do. So with all the storytelling that we're doing, do you even know brand stories? What's the story of Patagonia or Tiffany or Coke? I actually asked Kara that when we were having that conversation. I said, so Kara, you love Coke. You drink Diet Coke all the time. What's Coke's story? Not expecting much of an answer. I sure didn't have one. And then she talked about these times at summer camp where they played these games with breaking off the Coke tabs and it would determine which boys they liked. And she told me about this other time when Coke came out with these limited edition cans with these red tabs and all her friends were collecting them. And so all of a sudden this brand was used to unlock these memories of hers. The stories that Kara remembers are her own. These are the stories that matter most to her. They're the stories that matter most to us, and they're the stories that should matter most to brands. And what's amazing is, as obsessed as we are with the renaissance of the age of storytelling, we've got the antidote. The best way to combat storytelling and avoid getting into the trap of it is to focus on conversations, on relationships. You get it, right? The antidote is social media. Now, we've got these opportunities every second of the day, no matter what kinds of brands we're dealing with. We know there are people who care about our brands, and there are probably many more who would care if given the chance or given a reason to care. What brands have the opportunity to do now is get away from stories and to build relationships. How amazing is that? A Business Insider headline read this year, "We got to look inside the 45-day planning process that goes into creating a single corporate tweet." Brands can't move that slow in a conversational medium and think they'll build meaningful connections with consumers. There are moments that happen every single day when people representing brands can check in with people, ask them questions, take an interest in their lives. They can thank and follow up with people. They could do this en masse or one-on-one. And all this is very good for the brand. There's never been a greater premium put upon intelligence. So how can we use this embarrassment of riches in terms of the tools and experience that we have? How can we get to know people better and be more human? I mean, isn't that what we want to do with our lives? Isn't this all people want? To be treated as humans and as individuals? To be respected as people and as a person? Isn't wanting to be more human the thing that makes us more human? So now we can. This is going to be our focus. Instead of storytelling, we're going to shift to story making and make stories together with the people who care about us. By listening, by responding, by caring, and by being more human, we can make stories that people remember and share. Moving away from storytelling and towards story making is going to make everything that we do worthwhile. So there you go. I got a lot off my chest today, and thanks for having me here to do it. It's kind of like a form of confession I can handle. I even feel a bit like Mr. Moskowitz in the story. I don't just want to tell you this, I want to tell everybody. So let's make our goal being more human first and making everything we do about relationships. Let's stop the storytelling and start the story making. We can do this. Let's do this together. Thank you.